This episode of Pop Apologist is brought to you by Booking.com. Yeah. From vacation rentals to hotels across the U.S., Booking.com has the ideal summer stay for absolutely anyone, even those who might seem impossible to please. Find exactly what you're booking for. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. Book today on the site or in the app. We are so excited because we are joined by Nora Princiotti. Nora is an author and staff writer at The Ringer, where she covers culture from Taylor Swift to the National Football League. She also hosts the pop music podcast Every Single Album. She is also the author of her newly released book, Hit Girls, that is an entertaining and deeply nostalgic dive into how female pop stars broke through the music industry in the 2000s and altered the cultural landscape forever. Nora, thank you so much for joining Pop Apologists.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this.
It's going to be so fun. Chanler and I got an advance copy of Hit Girls, don't mean to brag, and we had such a fun time reading through about all of these pop icons that really did, I think, shape millennial childhoods and were these fixtures in our lives. And it was just such a fun, walk down memory road to read about Avril Lavigne, Beyonce, Britney, Rihanna, Lady Gaga. There's just so much in here that I had forgotten. So thank you for this historical document.
So it's funny you say that because a couple weeks ago, my publisher emailed me and was like, I have great news. And I really think they should have said, like, this is a real good news, bad news situation. Because what it was that the book had been chosen as like an Amazon editor's pick, which is obviously great. And I'm very happy for that. But they have to put it in a category. And they'd put it in history because that's what the 2000s is now. And I was like, okay, I'm sure this is good for sales, so I guess I'll take it. But I'm honestly incredibly insulted on behalf of millennials everywhere.
Chanler and I had a similar moment professionally where we were going to do a collaboration with another podcast. And we were like, let's talk about, iconic pop moments of the 90s. And their producer wrote back and she's like, these girls were born in the late 2000s. So they would, they were wondering if you could do something a little bit more current. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Wow. Put in our place. No, but it is a historical document. And there's so many fun, stories, so many fun moments.
I also think that the book is like the reason that Lauren and I have this podcast, I would say. Like the women contained in the book, maybe that's wrong to say, your book. But like the women in this book that you talk about are like the reason why like we care about pop culture. Like these women raised us and they are like, they've held our attention for so long. And it's like, why we do what we do.
No, I'm so glad you said that because my experience of writing it was I had this like crystal clear understanding of who needed to be in the book. Like there was just something, it's like instinctual at this point where I was like, okay, well, Paris Hilton belongs in this book, but also so does Ashlee Simpson, but also so does Gaga. And it just made innate sense to me to group those people together. And then, of course, I had to go back and be like, okay, what actually can I say about all of these people in combination with each other? And that took a lot more like, soul searching and thinking and talking to editors and sort of figuring out that, so much of it ended up having to do with the experience of covering Taylor Swift over the last few years and feeling like we've gotten to this point with sort of the state of the pop star and realizing that the umbrella for all of those people together was that they kind of created that mold that we live with now. But initially I was like, well, I don't totally know what it is, but I just know that all of those people belong together because as you said, like they raised us. That was our childhood.
They paved the way. They built the tunnel, whatever you want to say. Like they are like the reason that we have like a Taylor Swift now and so anyway, yeah, just paying respect to these like, the shoulders of giants.
To these hit girls. I mean, Chanler and I, our favorite for sure is Taylor Swift. So we are going to exercise a modicum of restraint and leave her to the end because if we start now, we will not stop.
I'm not going to make any promises for myself.
That's fine. I would not ask you to.
I would love to start a little with Ashlee Simpson because I feel like my personal journey with Ashlee Simpson, I think, is one a lot of people shared, which is at the beginning when she first came out and hit the music scene. we all thought, okay, this is Jessica's sister. She's not Jessica. And she kind of seemed a little cringe, like Avril tryhard wannabe.
A little more grungy.
Yeah.
Sure.
A little more edgy, but it didn't, I think, read as super authentic. But I think part of growing up and maturing is realizing that Pieces of Me is a banger. And these songs are excellent. So I'm curious if you had a similar trajectory, your journey with Ashlee, and what you think her contribution really was to the canon.
So my journey, I was like always pro. I was maybe a little bit more of an Avril Ashlee girl than like a Britney girl, which is not to say that I didn't love both. And I actually don't feel like I felt the need to choose quite as much as I think when I've talked to other people and I've talked to our peers. I think a lot of people felt strongly that they kind of needed to be in one camp or the other. And I don't totally remember that being how I felt, but I did. I loved her from the start. I think the thing that I thought was interesting just going back and thinking about her was that the fact that she had Jessica, I think was so instructive because it was a little mini example of the like Avril versus Britney dichotomy where there was this whole idea, I think, especially coming out of the 90s, because a lot of the 2000s, particularly the early years, exists so much in the shadow of the 90s and how people thought about music in the 90s, which was so defined by grunge and rock and roll in general and these ideas of like very, you know, serious men who were thinking and playing guitar and allegedly. And so there was this idea that that meant that you were authentic. If you were standing on a stage with a real acoustic instrument and if you had this kind of edge, that somehow that was real. And the problem is that when you start to interrogate, like, okay, what does it mean for it to be real? It's still a performance. You know, Kurt Cobain was still performing and had an affect to some degree. It starts to fall apart really quickly. And so I think what we did is we defined authenticity in relation to something else. So Avril was authentic because she wasn't like Britney Spears.
Oh, interesting.
But because that was, and I think Ashlee to some degree was cast in the relief of her sister. But then when someone like that comes out and the beginning of their career is marketed so aggressively as like, this is deep, this is from the soul, this isn't this, you know, Swedish Hit Factory woman who's just hopping into a studio and singing to track. By the way, a skill, something people are interested in, an art in and of itself. I don't really know what's wrong with that. But when you're told that someone is important because they're doing the opposite of that, it's kind of a trap, right? Because once they're revealed to not actually be, once they're revealed to be doing some element of performance, then they're a fraud. And I think both Avril and Ashlee got really caught up in that because in Avril's case, she's basically just as much of a major label pop star, someone whose songs are being marketed to a specific audience as Britney Spears was. And so the idea that she did a little bit of songwriting. So did Britney. But the idea that like every lyric that she was saying was this deeply felt from the soul thing she'd scribbled in her bedroom, that was always a fabrication. And that was always marketing. And the problem was it was just so aggressive that when someone revealed, oh, well, she has co-writers, she has help, it's like, oh, she's been lying to all of us.
She's a fraud.
Totally. And so that's why I think it's funny because it started from this place of these are the real ones, but it switches so quickly to these are the fake ones because if you puncture the image, it got really sticky for people. So I think that's why the impression that they were a little try hard is something that a lot of people have. Again, I always love it because I sort of had an inclination to the angsty stuff. So I was always super into them. I think the thing that I love about Ashlee Simpson is just the fact that SNL performance, which I think is part of that paradigm of you're being revealed to just be sort of like another empty vessel pop star. And because the pitch was something different from that, it all comes crumbling down around her, has ended up being this kind of watershed moment in how people think about what we actually want out of pop stars, because it sparked this whole debate about poptimism. And like that is just really, that is a satisfying arc to me. So I've loved the music, but I also just sort of love what she's meant to culture over time.
And so you talk about poptivism in the book. What exactly is poptivism?
This is a complicated one because actually the sort of movement that came out of that Ashlee Simpson SNL performance was not about poptimism per se, but it was a conversation about Rockism, which is sort of the antithesis of poptimism, which was this idea that the music industry, and particularly criticism, used the ideals and values of rock and roll as the ideals and values of all music. So if you think about, rock and roll, since the advent of popular music for sale in recorded formats, which sort of is the 50s onward, rock and roll is kind of the defining musical genre. And so we would, we don't have a music hall of fame. We have a rock and roll hall of fame. Rolling Stone is a rock magazine. Now it's not, but it sort of is canonically. Yeah. And so that is how you get a lot of pop stars whose art form involves spectacle and fabrication and fantasy being analyzed through the same lenses and as though they share the same goals as someone who's getting up on stage with a 6-piece band and playing live music. And so the values of rockism would be like, your album is more important than your single. Your live touring has to be sort of this like athletic feat. It's supposed to be almost antagonistic to the mainstream, whereas pop is very friendly to the mainstream. And so in the wake of this Ashlee Simpson performance on SNL, where she's revealed to be lip syncing, and there is so much commentary over she's been exposed, she's a fraud, there is this really pivotal essay in the New York Times about why do we care that she's not doing this in the same way that Kurt Cobain was or the Beatles were? Like, why are those the values that we want to assess everyone by? And so that essay was actually sort of arguing against rockism. Poptimism ends up being the banner under which people kind of take that argument forward. And the idea of poptimism would be, just because there is an element of spectacle and fabrication that is intrinsic to pop music does not mean that it is any more shallow than any other genre or any other type of music, and that it should be assessed in accordance to its own goals, its own ideals.
Not all music endeavors at the same set of, same set of, like, it doesn't all need to be written by the person who sings it. It doesn't all need to be on an organic instrument. Like, I think that you also talk in the book about how, EDM is something that emerges and is really kind of judged harshly at the beginning. And I think you said Dave Grohl gave a quote where he said basically that, like, he got up on stage and he said, music is about, being with your guitar and singing a song you wrote.
He
and
said,
like
music the old-fashioned way or something like that.
Yeah,
Right?
that was at an awards show. Was it a Grammys or a VMAs or something? And he walked it back pretty quickly, because I think we now know Dave Grohl to be pretty clearly someone who sometimes gets a little chatty and then has some regrets about that, which is fine. I can relate to that in some ways. But then his apology post was like, I don't know how Skrillex does what he does, but I know it's really cool. And then he signed it like Dead Mouse, but Dave Mouse with the M and the I.
I mean, it's definitely giving, when I was your age, I walked to school in the snow.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
I think that people want to ascribe like morality or value to like their music taste and what they like, obviously what they like about, the music that they like. And they want the music that they like to be more high art maybe than other people. Not everyone, but I think, and this, I'm going to go to Taylor Swift. I know we said we were going to wait, but I think this is why, there's this kind of interesting thing where some people who, are really big music lovers partake in Taylor Swift or whatnot because they don't, they don't buy into like necessarily her as an artist sometimes,
Well,
which is ridiculous.
They don't like the idea of what it says about them. And
Sure.
that used to be, I think that idea used to be much bigger, especially when we were younger.
Agreed.
That your music said a lot about how cool you are,
Smart you were.
smart you were, cool, how unique your taste was. And I do think we're now in a environment where there's just like a little bit less prissiness around all of it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I do think it still exists, though, because think of how many people got into Taylor Swift or sort of felt a permission structure where they could start expressing the fact that they were into Taylor Swift around Folklore and Evermore. And that had something to do, at least, with the cosign of these really credible sort of alt indie rock guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's like ideal, although I think any avenue into appreciating the massive contributions to the artistic canon of Taylor Allison Swift is a good one. But it's still like, I do think that those ideas have really faded, but they are still with us.
Yeah. No, they definitely are. I mean, I feel like in many social circles I'm in, putting Taylor Swift on is something that will be met with consternation and some like open remarks. And so I feel like pearls before swine. I just don't.
I was literally walking with two new people who I'd never met before. We were at a birthday party and whatever. I met some two new people. I will say I think they were much younger than me. And I said that I love Taylor Swift. And I just felt the air change when I said it. And I was just like I just couldn't even believe like the effect of those words with just like two random people off the street.
The Gen Z I think, has a complicated relationship with her. And then if you get really young, they're obsessed with her, and then we're obsessed with her. But I think there is a skip. I talked to a college class somewhat recently, and they were really fun. And they actually asked really, really good questions because they have not grown up with her in the same way that we have, but she's been around for long enough that they have had enough experience that they kind of get what she's doing. But they were so like antagonistic, and I was like, okay, guys.
I want to talk about the innovation happening over at Clean Simple Eats, okay? They have come up with unflavored protein powder, which is something I was yearning for that I didn't know existed. And it is just perfect because sometimes you just want your protein shakes or your little, chocolate chip cookie dough balls to just have a little bit extra boost.
Okay, so you're telling me you can put this in a baked good. You can put it in water. You can just put it in whatever, and it will add protein without messing up the flavor, texture, consistency.
Yes, Lauren. It's literally a genius product. One scoop, I believe, has 25 grams of protein.
Wow.
Yes. It's the unflavored protein powder from Clean Simple Eats.
You guys go to cleansimpleeats.com. Use code PopApologist for 10% off. I swear by the clear protein cans. Chanler swears by the unflavored protein powder. There are many solutions thanks to Clean Simple Eats to get your protein needs. Cleansimpleeats.com. Use code PopApologist for 10% off. Chan, I have a friend. She's very esteemed, Forbes 30 under 30, has a very impressive company. She's a CEO. She's a tycoon. She sits on boards or whatever. She has a lot going on in her brain.
Why is she friends with you?
That is honestly the $1 million question. But I have to tell you, I got a text from her husband the other day, and he said, "Thank you so much for recommending Early Bird CBD. She has honestly been able to just chill out a little bit, so much more. She takes half a gummy, and it has been life-changing for her." We cannot swear by Early Bird CBD gummies more in our households.
They are the only gummies that I reach for.
They help you in the middle of the night just get back to sleep. If you want to enjoy a show more, a delicious meal, melt into that pillow of yours. You guys, earlybirdscbd.com. Use code POPAPOLOGIST for 20% off. You will not regret it, and a bottle lasts a long time. That's earlybirdscbd.com. Use code POPAPOLOGIST for 20% off.
The humidity in New York City is not kind to my hair. And I recently saw a photo of my hair from the back, and I knew it was time for me to get on the Nutrafol train. I've seen Lauren's results, and they're amazing. I've started taking Nutrafol Women's Balance, and things have already shifted. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. Anything worthwhile takes time, and with Nutrafol, you can see thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair and less shedding in just 3 to 6 months. It takes a whole-body approach to target the root causes, and their clinically tested formulas support what your hair actually needs. This summer, stop worrying about your hair and start making memories. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code POP. Find out why Nutrafol is the best-selling hair growth supplement brand at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code POP. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code POP.
First of all, I'm curious. You just interviewed Miley Cyrus, which is
Yes.
a huge interview. Congratulations. That's
Thank
incredible. I mean, this is a pop culture podcast. We do celebrity gossip. So I just have to ask, when you interview an A-lister, like, how does it work? Like, are there like doves that like come through the office first? Like, is there a flash of light before she emerges? Like, I'm so curious, like, how this happens.
I did feel like there was sort of a choir of angels that began to sing when she entered our studio. This happened in a way that was completely different from any other interview with a famous person that I've ever done. Not that I've done tons and tons, but she knew that on every single album, we were doing a series where we were covering every single Miley Cyrus album. And she got wind of it, and she just went, nobody's going to talk about every single album that I've ever created without my contribution to it. And she got in touch with us and was like, I want to come on.
I love
And
that.
That's incredible.
It was incredible. And I have not, I'm sure you guys sort of perceive this both as people who interview people, but also just observers of popular culture. I think in general, there is a thing that happens when someone has lived their life in the public eye for a long period of time, which is that there is a kind of defensiveness that sets in because you've been watched and people comment on you constantly. And I think it tends to create a little bit of a protective shell, which is really justifiable. But there's a tendency to approach most things from this place of, well, people are going to get things wrong about me. People are always getting things wrong about me. And I don't know that I've ever interviewed anyone even close to the plane of fame and long-term life in the public eye as Miley Cyrus, who just did not have a shred of that. She was she was an open book, and she was not precious about things deep in her catalog that didn't work and songs that are not her best songs. She also was completely willing if stuff like that came up and she was like, yeah, that song stinks, but that wasn't my idea. My label made me do that. And I had nothing to do with that. And I will take the responsibility for the stuff that was my idea that didn't work out, but that one is not on me. And then she could talk about the stuff, obviously, that is transcendent and some of her all-time songs. And she just, like, the music, her personal life, we were asking her about the Younger Now album era, which is the one with Malibu. And she was wearing a lot of, like, she'd done this hard pivot to wearing a lot of sort of white, flowy cotton dresses. She's got a flower crown in her hair. And this was in 2017, I want to say. So it was briefly post-election. And there was a lot of confusion in the branding of it because it seemed like this sort of strange idea to try to appeal to a more conservative strain of culture. It also just like, Miley Cyrus had pretty recently been hair in the buns and twerking and doing something really, really different. And all of a sudden she's like in a field wearing a flower crown and people are like, what's going on here? And this like makes me want to cry in some ways, but I also thought it was just amazing that she was able to articulate it that way. What she said to us was, my marriage was kind of falling apart and I was trying to save it. And I was with this person and she would just say Liam. She was like, well, Liam and I was like, I know.
That was crazy. She's like, basically all my songs are about Liam. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You never hear that someone talk like that.
Yeah, it's because it's always, there's such a tendency to be sort of euphemistic, even when everybody knows what everybody's talking about, and say like, oh, well, I was in a past relationship that was, it was happening this way. She was like, well, like Liam just really felt like the craziness of the Bangers era had had really strained us, and I wanted to prove that I could be like a good girl and softer, totally. And
How vulnerable.
It totally made sense to me of that era. But I also was like, wow, I can't believe she just said that.
I need to now go listen to that album and Malibu specifically with with all that new context, because I don't know, I loved her and Liam together, and obviously, it didn't work out, but like hearing
not meant
to be, but hearing that, I don't know, just hearing that she shared that with you is amazing.
But she also the thing that was crazy about it was she wasn't like, deep breath, inhale, now I'm going to express my like deepest truth. She was just like, yeah, I put all these white dresses on because I was like sort of trying to prove something to my husband. And that just wasn't a great place to make an album from. And then she just moved on.
It sounds like, she was raised in the Disney sphere or whatever. Like, it sounds like she doesn't take herself crazy seriously, and that she doesn't, I don't know, she's not so like, precious, like you said, about her history and everything, that it's like, I did this, I wrote 7 things, when I was dating Nick Jonas or whatever. Like, I love it.
People went, at one point she did say Niley for Nick and Miley. And there is a subset of the internet that really went crazy for that moment in a way that I didn't realize that was going to happen.
Oh my gosh.
I love it.
If you compare it to She Who Must Not Be Named, there's just no interview ever where where Taylor would say, oh, and then Jake did this and I was trying to prove this. So very, very cool.
I think it also, if I can, just extrapolate a bit, I feel like it speaks to maybe the place that her and Liam are in now, where it's, I don't know, it's not like, maybe it sounds like they're in a good place if she feels like she can kind of comfortably talk about their relationship.
Yeah, it seemed like there's a lot of love there. I mean, even with her family, who she's gone through such ups and downs with in terms of conflict there, like when someone is able to be open about something, it always signals to me that they have a certain peace with it, even if it's not an easy thing.
And safe people around them.
Yeah.
So I'm curious when it comes to Miley, I will say I definitely have probably neglected her musical contributions personally, which is something I will atone for. I just have been listening to a lot of Taylor. And my question is I'm 34, if I'm entering the Miley sphere, beyond the radio hits, beyond Flowers, beyond Party in the USA, what album do I turn to at this stage?
You should listen to Miley Cyrus off the second Hannah Montana two-sided disc, because that album is full of bangers. I swear to you, it's so neglected.
Now I want to see what's on that. I feel like I might be quasi-familiar.
Yeah, you will be. There's a song called The Driveway on that album that's The Driveway might be on Breakout.
Love Breakout.
It has like East Northumberland High.
For everyone, this is the album cover. This is where you need to begin, Lauren.
I'm definitely going to give that album its due. But is there another album that's maybe potentially a little more mature?
Sure. Listen to the new one. Something Beautiful is really good. I think it's her best top to bottom album. I think the thing with Miley is that, and this had not crystallized to me until I spent 10 or 12 or 15 hours of podcast time deep diving. She kind of has been a singles artist in a lot of ways. And I think, she talked about, she's clearly an incredibly high energy person. And when she was talking to us about her new album, she was going, oh, and I already have the next one. Like it's on my phone, and she's holding up her phone and she's got a track list and she has all of this stuff. And that was interesting to me, because one thing that I had noticed over the course of going through all the albums is she would do this thing where she was putting out a record, and when she was doing press for it and promo for it, she would say, yeah, this doesn't really represent me anymore, and I'm kind of on to the next thing. And I was always like, is this like a defense mechanism thing?
Just in case.
Is this like, if it doesn't land, she's saying it's not her, or she's not happy with it in some way? And I had perceived that all is within this kind of pendulum swinging of, she comes out of Disney, and by the time she was out of being Hannah, I think she was really ready to be done with that, and felt like Disney had become a little bit restrictive for her. And then she boomeranged so far in the other direction with, like, once you get to Bangers especially, that everything was a reaction to the thing that came before, instead of her actually sitting down and being like, who am I? What do I want to do? Who do I want to be as an artist? And doing what really represented that. And I still think some of that is probably true. But what she said was, no, that's really not it. I wasn't trying to not stand by the work. I just really, truly am on to the next thing. And it takes so long to market an album that by the time I'm sitting down doing the interviews, I really, truly am in a different place. And I think that made me understand a little bit why she's had these huge, huge singles, because they come out in a moment in time when she's like really invested in the process. And maybe like, I don't mean to say that she's not invested in the process the whole way through, but where it feels really present to her. And so I think her singles have tended to be the right ones. Like we always talk with Taylor about how she doesn't always make the right choices for the singles. Miley almost always chooses the right songs
because she can
to
just
be the
release them.
singles.
She doesn't have to wait for the full album to come out.
Yeah, she's just doing it. And so I don't think, like, if you are listening to We Can't Stop and Wrecking Ball off of Bangers, sure, go give that whole album a spin through. But you're hearing the Mount Rushmore songs. Like that's right. I think you have the right understanding of Miley Cyrus as an artist if you have been listening to the radio singles.
Well, thank you. Okay.
You've been doing it right all along.
I appreciate that.
Do you want to share that little bit of tea that you had about, or no?
Oh, there's
my God. She did say one of the craziest things she said when we were talking was that during Miley Cyrus and Her Dead Pets, which was the album she put out for free on SoundCloud. Just still one of the craziest things that like an A-lister pop star has done in our lifetimes is she did this like psychedelic rock experimental album with Wayne Coyne from the Flaming Lips and put it out for free. And it was all inspired by pets that had died. She also said that she used to keep the ashes of her dead pig on her bedside table. In like a jar, but then she wasn't getting, like, she was dating and she would bring people home and she felt like it was cramping her sex life. So then
the ashes of her dead pig.
Yeah. She's had a lot of animals over time. And a lot of them do seem to, she seems like an incredible pet owner. And she was, sorry, now I'm like going in 90 different, she said a lot of stuff.
Pets die. That happens.
Yeah, pets die. That happens. And she would really like to have 15 dogs. But you guys as native Californians, maybe you are more familiar with this than I was. You're only allowed to have so many pets in California, or maybe it's Los Angeles.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
That
it's
sounds
definitely
about right.
Coming from a good place, like to avoid a hoarding situation. But I will say that I thought that she made a pretty compelling argument where she was like, I have farmland. I will feed these dogs organic food every day of their lives. They will be so well cared for. There are so many animals that need homes. All I want to do is give it to them. And so I felt that there should be some way to maybe we can be the first 3 signatories to the petition to let Miley Cyrus have all the dogs she wants.
Literally, send me the change.org. I'm ready.
Yeah, no, this is my new pet cause. No pun intended. But the thing that she said that was crazy, other than the thing about the ashes of her dead pigs on her bedside table and all of the other things that she said that were crazy, it was a 2.5-hour interview, was that when she was doing Dead Pets, which I think was when she was also doing the most drugs in her life. Sorry, I'm giving you like 90 tangents. The other thing that she said that I thought was really funny was that, you know, she is sober now and I think that's brought her a lot of positive things in her life. But she was also like, I'm so glad that I had that era and that I did all that shit. It's like, that's, again, I just think there's something healthy about that.
I love it.
But she said that she would call when she would buy drugs, she would write it as a line item in her, like, the budget of what it costs to be Miley Cyrus, which is part of whatever business org she had at the time. She would call it vintage clothing.
Wow. I mean, that is just such an insane thing to say publicly.
I know.
Pretty phenomenal.
I know. Page 6 like wrote it up and I was like, I need Miley Cyrus to not get in trouble with the government over my podcast.
I also love that she was literally writing off drugs, which, I mean, it's just such an interesting, it's probably a nominal amount in the scope of what it costs to run her life.
That nominal at the time.
Potentially, that's fair. Potentially fair.
I love it. I love it. Everyone go listen to that episode.
She's a real one.
This episode of Pop Apologists is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. When I'm planning a getaway, whether it's a long weekend with my husband or a getaway with my girlfriends, I always start with where we're staying. Because for me, the stay isn't just part of the experience, it is the experience. I always look for a truly stunning hotel or vacation rental with a few non-negotiables, a gorgeous bathroom, a private terrace, and a view that makes you want to press pause on real life. I've also learned to filter for balcony and bathtub because sometimes a golden hour soak is the entire itinerary. Oh, and my husband, he pretends not to care until he finds those 800 thread count sheets. That's why I love Booking.com. If I can find my perfect stay on Booking.com, anyone can. Find exactly what you're booking for. Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Book today on the site or in the app.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. As the temperatures rise, I get that itch to refresh my closet. But I'm not wasting money on trendy pieces that I'll only wear once. Quince changes everything. Their clothes are timeless, lightweight, and way more elevated than anything else at this price. So I've picked up their 100% European linen shorts for only $30, plus another breathable linen piece that I've worn everywhere. And if you add in the Italian leather platform sandals, it's a whole look. Quince is the go-to place for your summer wardrobe. The quality totally feels like luxury, just without the markup. Quince works directly with top artisans and cuts out the middlemen, so you get the good stuff for half the cost. And they only partner with factories using safe, ethical practices and premium fabrics. Now that's a summer one. Give your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/apologist for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/apologist to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/apologist.
Okay, let's talk about Since You've Been Gone.
Please.
Because I feel like so many things about this song. One, I didn't know Kelly Clarkson didn't write it. So that's one piece of new information I got from the book. But also that it kind of revitalized Max Martin's career.
Yeah. Yeah. He had because his first era had been doing all of the boy band stuff and early Britney. But that's pretty, the Britney songs were a little bit different from the boy band songs. But he had a pretty clear sonic palette of like what a Max Martin song sounds like. And that wasn't trendy anymore. Like once we'd gotten to 2002, 3, 4, there was such an influx of hip hop and hip hop producers who were working with pop stars that the charts sounded really, really different than they had in 1999 and 2000, 2001. And it's not like he was struggling to find work. But I think people in the industry looked at Max Martin as a little bit of a one-trick pony. And so then with that song and with this new kind of texture of bringing elements of rock music into really mainstream pop, that ended up kind of being his second act. And he would go on to have more and more and more. But I don't know, for instance, if we get to the Max Martin that's working with Taylor and Ariana and The Weeknd, if he doesn't have the stepping stone of Kelly Clarkson and Pink,
Yeah.
where there's this like rock bombast through a pop filter, because it did show like it was kind of like a I've still got it thing for him.
Well, and he didn't, but he originally did not want to give the song to Kelly Clarkson, right?
Well, no, because he was like, this woman is from American Idol and that's corny as shit.
Yeah.
And like he'd been working with like Celine Dion and Michael Bolton and doing these sort of greatest hits albums that were big albums. And like, I'm sure he was still doing really well, but he was not like seen as a tastemaker. And so I think he thought of American Idol as a little bit like, in a pejorative sense to him, like a little bit middle America.
Yeah.
And so he didn't want to do it. He had to be convinced. I don't think he knew quite how good of a singer she was either.
And arguably, it would not have made the dent in his career that it did if it wasn't sung by Kelly Clarkson. Because
No, totally. They tried to give it to Hilary Duff, who I love, who's like one of the most important women in the world to me. And particularly was during the time frame of a lot of the artists in the book. But she could not have gone up the octave on the song. She couldn't have just given it the same sort of bombast.
Yeah, I mean, I think that song for so many of us was a song we blasted in our cars and had a lot of cathartic, belting it out, singing moments when we were teenagers.
Oh,
was
totally.
The best.
Totally. It's like the Kelly Clarkson superpower is to sing in a way that makes you feel like you are standing behind a jet engine, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And no one actually wants to hear us do that. But I think the idea of doing that is really, really fun. And like the pantomime of doing that when you are in the car, especially with the windows down, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, and I think Kelly Clarkson, her vocal just talent is so strong. She really embodies the fact that, she might not have written this song, but when she performs it, it doesn't matter. It is her song.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And it's such an artistry in the way she sings.
We can take a moment to pause on American Idol. We can just take a moment for American Idol, a moment of silence. Actually, I think it's probably still running. I don't know.
I think it's still exists.
Well, like, what impact do you feel like American Idol had on our generation in that moment in time?
I do wonder if some of those shows contributed to, like, we just talked about One Way, right? Is that I do think that Kelly, as one of the most successful artists to come out of that show, one, validated it through her success and just proving that American Idol could create a pop star who would have like a huge song like that.
Right.
But I think the other thing that's interesting is there are so many conversations about the idea of like relatable artists and celebrities in general. But I think with the pop girlies in particular, there's this really pervasive idea that like we want to think that they're normal in some way. And that really didn't used to be the case. Like no one was looking at Madonna and being like, what I want you to be is a normal girl.
Yeah,
like,
I want your get ready with me.
Right, right. And I do wonder if the experience of so many people our age spending a lot of time watching actual normal people be like plucked out of their lives, and at least within the idea of the show, it failed more times than it actually succeeded. But the idea was we can you can actually become a real pop artist through this. Has something to do with that. Has something to do with our desire to feel like we can relate to these people, even though we also look to them for fantasy and spectacle.
Right. If we just had it in us to, register online, to sit in the 3-hour line, and we were just willing to put in the work, we potentially could also have a right to start up.
It also led us to a great American politician, Clay Aiken.
I didn't know Clay Aiken was doing some poptivism. I guess it's poptimism, but doing some, activism, some work. He's a public servant now.
I can't speak to where he's at in 2025, but I do know that he had a run with politics.
Yeah, he's had some eras.
Yeah, definitely had some eras. Sure. Like, pre-Taylor, he actually has some eras.
He was a real pioneer in the eras space.
You guys, we must wait no longer to discuss Taylor Swift. So much to say. We need to start with the most important questions because we need to get through this quickly. First of all, how do you approach the re-records now that she owns the masters? Are we disregarding them? Are we over them?
I'm listening to the ones that I want to listen to and listening to the OGs that I want to listen to.
Yeah, because there's a New Yorker article Scott sent us, and it showed some Speak Now, original verse now, and now we can say it's not the same. Not even
not
close.
The same.
Totally. No, I think Speak Now was one of the ones that there was just an angst in hearing from a petulant teenager that I think was really, really hard to recapture. The funny thing is that some of Fearless, I think because some of those songs are so broad in a good way, where like Love Story is just a sing along. It's this sort of all timer song that is so hooky. You just sort of instantly recognize this is amazing. I think hearing that with her more mature, fuller vocals is really wonderful. And so I think even though it's temporally similar, that's one that went really well to me. And then Speak Now was a little bit tougher. I also I ride for the internalized misogyny version of Better Than Revenge. So like that's something that I continue to go back to.
Do you think that it was her plan to devalue the original so she could buy them back at a discount?
Yeah. I mean, I think she's had a few different plans along the way, even if the execution of all of those plans has been the same thing, has been doing the re-recordings and going on the Eras tour and kind of creating this whole new world around all of her past discography and then using that to her advantage. I think initially she was in a blind rage and was so angry at Scooter and Scott Borchetta that the idea comes up of re-recording her back catalog, and she's just like, yeah, if I can do this to get back at those MFers, like, let's go. And then through the experience of diving back into that, the tour is born. Probably somewhere, I don't know if it's when she's on the tour or sometime after Shamrock Capital buys the masters from Scooter. It probably becomes clear to her pretty quickly that she can buy these back if she wants to, and that they are open to doing a deal. Because I think they have been pretty open. By that point, I think the reason that she doesn't is because the plan is just kind of in motion. The plan is working.
People are excited about the plan.
She's making a lot of money on the
She's making a lot of money. And sort of knows that she can probably continue to do that, and that it's facilitating the tour, and it's just everything is sort of building off of each other because people are, I think one of the it's not a dirty secret, but one of the misunderstood ironies is that by doing everything that she's done over the last few years, which has just made her even more famous, yes, she devalued the originals relative to the value of the re-recordings because she was able to get the streamers and a lot of business partners to prioritize those records. Actually, all of her catalog got more attention.
Right.
People were listening to original Speak Now or original Fearless or original Red more than they were before the re-recordings came out, even if it was a smaller piece of the pie. And so she had just it was just a rising tide that rose so much that I think she had a business incentive to let it play out. I think it was probably really fun for her. The tour was groundbreaking and amazing. And why would you stop that momentum? So I think it all kind of played hand in hand. But she could have done this sooner if her only goal had been, I want to buy back the masters.
You cover so much, obviously, in pop music and pop culture, but really music. My question for you is, Taylor is obviously the superstar of our generation. I think she sucks a lot of the oxygen out of the room when it comes to, other people in her sphere. Who would we be obsessed with if there was no Taylor Swift?
Oh, wow.
Who would be the queen?
What an interesting question. I mean, I will push back on the premise just a little bit, which is think of the last couple of years. And yes, the summer of 2023, I think was so defined by the Eras tour, and, rightfully so. But since then, we have had Sabrina Carpenter, Chappell Roan, we've had Brat Summer, we've had some of the albums from Dua Lipa, Ariana weren't necessarily huge, but still made an impact. Ariana's had multiple number ones. She's also been super zeitgeisty because of Wicked. I don't know that we look at the last particularly year and a half and can really say that even with Travis and all the football stuff, that she hasn't left room for other women in pop to thrive and to get their moments and to get their shine.
By the way, I'm not saying she's not leaving room for them. You know, you can't help how she can't help how amazing she is.
No, and I totally know what you're saying because she is a magnet and she gets a lot of eyeballs. I don't know that I've felt like I've experienced her being so central to culture as she was at the peak of the tour. And like we're going on a year or even a little bit more. Like even by the end of the tail end of the tour, I think people had moved on a little bit, even though the Swiftie community obviously was still so engaged. I mean, I think it's Beyonce is the answer.
Okay.
You know, I think Cowboy Carter, it's sort of tempting to compare it to the Eras Tour because there isn't much else that you can compare something of that scale to, and the length, and it's, you know, it's 3 hours long. She really is the pure performer of our generation. Like there's just nobody else who's doing it like her. And so I wonder if maybe there would be more of a laser focus on what she's accomplished over the last few years if Taylor weren't such a big part of the conversation. But I'm actually so happy to be able to say that I think a lot of people are getting their flowers.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
I feel like with Brat Summer, I feel like that was a full takeover of the months of like those, like that felt almost like on a Taylor level for me, where everybody like it was everywhere.
Yes. But the funny thing about that is like, that is one of those, Brat is one of those, you ever hear people talk about how it feels like a certain HBO show, like Succession or something, is the absolute biggest thing that's happening in culture. And then if you actually do it by the numbers, there's some like random CBS show, no shade, that 10 times more people are watching on a weekly basis. Brat was my favorite album of last year. I go so hard for Charlie. I'm obsessed with her. Brat is a little bit of that phenomenon where if you're like a you know, New York City wannabe cool kid, it's the biggest thing in the world to you. And then like that album in its first week did, I think, around 80,000 album equivalent units in sales. The Tate McRae album was 177.
Wow, you're kidding.
Yeah.
I'm like just now starting to like dip my toes into the Tate McRae discography.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. But Brat felt so much bigger.
It felt so much bigger. And like it was, because by the time like once we got to the Kamala Harris moment in Brat Summer and everybody's talking about it on CNN, like I do think that Brat did achieve a certain level of like saturation in culture, but it is a good example of how things that actually are a little bit more niche can feel really ubiquitous depending on sort of where you're spending the spaces you're spending your time.
Well, you don't have like 3 generations of Charlie XCX fans.
Right.
You know, like you do with Taylor
Swift.
Swift.
Totally.
I want to talk about for a little bit Taylor's relationship with her fans and how it's like evolved. You know, we started with the girl commenting back on people, you know, on her posts. And then now we've got songs like, you know, But Daddy, I Love Him, where she's kind of like frustrated by her fans, the Hannahs and the Sarahs. So yeah, curious what you think about that, how it's evolved.
I do think that she, like, I had to think of her in the context of the 2000s to write about her for this book, because like I don't canonically think of her as a 2000s artist. But the way that made sense to me was to look at the origins of the fan base and look at how early she was going after people on MySpace and being like, I'm one of you, you are me, I am you, we are best friends, and you're going to call a radio station and tell them to play my songs. And she has kind of masterminded the degree of parasociality in pop star fan relationships.
I mean, I think we all, Lauren and I can speak for us, like we feel like if she just got in a room with us for 15 minutes, we'd all be best friends. Like like I feel like it's meant to be. And so I don't know, like she's done that better than any other superstar.
Yeah.
But now I feel like it's dissipated because she now gives us almost nothing, right? Like I mean, when she's on stage, yes, you feel that, but she's not posting on Instagram stories anymore. We don't see her life at all.
But there is still like a little bit of the Taylurking or whatever,
yeah,
you know?
I mean, even think about the letter announcing that she bought back the re-recordings. It really stood out to me that she called it Rep TV. Like she adopts the syntax of fans.
Yeah.
Like she didn't say Reputation parentheses Taylor's version. She was like, I know. What about Rep TV?
She's still liking and commenting on TikTok. Like she's in it.
Yeah.
Okay, we have so much we could discuss further. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Nora, this has been so fun. I mean, you're in New York, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's just do this again.
Let's do it again.
Like,
Anytime.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. Everyone, go buy Hit Girls. It's available now by Nora Princiotti. We'll have the link in our Spotify. We'll also have the link to your episode with Miley Cyrus and also to Every Single Album, your hit podcast. So congratulations.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me. This was so much fun.
Of course. Bye.
Bye.